Hi, Dr. Kinney. Welcome to the Genetic Genius podcast. I am so excited to have you as a guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yay! Well, before we dive deep into talking about how stress affects the hormones, such a great topic, which we'll have to keep it short in that hour time to cover everything we can. But I'd love for you to just talk about who you are, let the audience get to know you, and what's your place in the world, what's your passion?
Sure. So I'm a naturopathic doctor. I practice in Annapolis, Maryland. I got into the medicine because it really helped me in my early 20s. I went through a period of severe depression. My hormones were really out of whack. I gained a lot of weight, my joints. Long story short, went to my general care practitioner and he tried to, shove me out the door with a depression or diagnosis of depression and Wellbutrin and patted me on my back. And I thought, I don't know, this just seems, I had changed my diet. I just graduated from college. I had a lot of stuff going on. I had a lot of stress going on. And I ended up, my therapist actually referred me to a naturopathic doctor. And after 3 visits with a naturopathic doctor who, determined I was not on the right diet, my hormones were out of balance, I had B12 deficiency, they kind of looked at all the different pieces and basically helped me become whole again. And so, and through that process, I thought, wow, this is really cool. I'd been pre-med, but it kind of gone a different track. I ended up going back to school. So I'm now really passionate about helping women understand that, you don't always have to take a medication like the birth control pill or an antidepressant. If there's something, if you don't feel like yourself, sometimes, we can dive a little deeper and we can figure out what's going on. Now, and not to say that there isn't a time and place where medication is warranted, because I'm, a big believer in that as well. But yeah, I'm really passionate, particularly about teaching women how their bodies work and how hormones are supposed to work and how you're supposed to feel. And then also teaching everyone how stress can impact that. Because there's this really delicate balance between going to a doctor and you feeling dismissed by them telling you, oh, you're just stressed, here's a medication. And because a lot of times that is true. Yeah, the reason you're feeling the way you are is because of stress. But it's a very different experience to walk into a doctor's office and have someone say, yeah, you know what, you've been through a lot. Let me walk you through how stress has exactly affected your body. And here's what we're going to do to fix that, to get you back to feeling better. And so anyway, so that's what I do with my patients. A lot of them come to me, their stress levels are through the roof. Their hormones are really out of whack. And they may be thyroid hormones, that may be blood sugar dysregulation, that may be sex hormones, that may be adrenal hormones. And typically the root cause is they've been stressed, right? And we can dive into this deeper, but that can be external stressors, so things going on in your life, but it can also be internal stressors, which can be things, maybe a genetic mutation or a nutrient deficiency or a stealth pathogen. So we're kind of trying to figure out, what's the body dealing with internally? What are you dealing with externally? And how can we kind of retrain the nervous system so we can get you back on track? So anyways, there's a lot of information. Sorry,
No, that's great, Dr. Kinney. I love that. I can see your passion and what you do in helping women really get back on track, and from that naturopathic perspective, it's so key. And I really liked what you said too about, someone coming in with a different perspective and really diving deep into what was going on with you, which then sparked your passion for helping others, which is, that's just a huge part of a lot of how naturopathic doctors, we get on our road to helping others, right? Great. Well, I'd love for us to kind of dive deep today into that hormonal conversation, so to speak.
Yeah.
But let's just start from, back up a little bit and talk about just adrenal fatigue in general, because I think, it's like that term that's kind of thrown around a little bit. And a lot of people are like, well, what does that even mean?
Yeah. Well, so let's back up and let's talk about cortisol, because that's pretty much the main hormone that I try to educate my patients or on my podcast or anywhere that I'm talking. It's a really important hormone, and we think of it as the stress hormone, but it has a lot of other functions in the body, right? So it helps to govern our circadian rhythms. The surge in cortisol is what typically wakes us up in the morning. And when it falls, that's what allows us to fall asleep. It also is one of our body's main natural anti-inflammatories. So it's our body's own steroid. So just like you would get prednisone if you have a crazy rash or super pain, that prednisone is synthetic cortisol. So cortisol is our body's way of reducing, and at a cellular level, when you have inflammation going on, when cortisol binds to its receptors and it gets into the nucleus, one of its jobs is to downregulate the production of inflammatory cytokines, which are things that will make inflammation go out of control. And so when we talk about adrenal fatigue, and so this is, we need to understand that cortisol, it's important, and we don't want it to be too high or too low. We want it to be in the right amount, just like with any other hormone. Yeah, because when it is too high, and I like to equate cortisol to how we think about blood sugar. So when cortisol is too high in the blood, just like when sugar is too high in the blood, we start to have problems. We want cortisol to be inside the cell, just like we want glucose to be inside the cell. And a lot of people, over chronic periods of stress, if you've been pumping out tons and tons of cortisol, a couple things can happen. Either the adrenals start to run out of the building blocks with which to make cortisol, and we start to get lower levels, which makes you not feel so good. Or you can develop almost like we call it a glucocorticoid resistance, so a resistance to cortisol. So the cortisol doesn't get inside the cell, which means your cells don't get the anti-inflammatory thing that they need. And it's very similar to how type 2 diabetes comes about.
Right.
We've had too much cortisol in the bloodstream. The body stops producing the receptor, just like too much sugar, you'll stop producing insulin receptors. And then we get this glucocorticoid resistance picture. And so I went a little detailed there, but that's
great.
So there's a lot of different ways that adrenal fatigue can show up. Yeah. So, and that's because it depends on what's going on. But I like to use the analogy when I'm having people think about, I'm big on analogies with my patients, because
it's good. It helps people understand, right? What's going on.
And they help me understand. So me creating analogy is like, okay, I can teach this. So I like to think of cortisol as your body's currency or your body's money. So, and when you sleep or you rest, that's your body building or earning cortisol.
Exactly.
So, right. So when you sleep at night, you're earning cortisol. And then throughout the day, you're spending it, right? Your body spends it on energy. It spends it on healing, whatever, stuff needs to be healed in the body. It'll spend it, if you're stressed. So if you're sleeping for 8 hours a day or 8 hours a night, and let's say that gives you $100 worth of cortisol, you have a day where you have an average day and you spend $100 worth, you're good. But let's say you go through a period of time where you only sleep for 4 hours a night for a prolonged period of time. You may only earn $50 worth of cortisol. And then you still need to maybe spend $100, or maybe you have an extra stressful day and you need to spend $150. What happens? You don't actually have enough in your bank account. And everyone listening, I'm sure if you're an adult, you know how credit works. Your body will give you a line of credit. So you drink a cup of coffee, that's like spending money on your credit card, or you take, if you're someone who takes stimulant medication or anything that kind of gives you energy that you don't have, that's putting your body more and more into adrenal debt or cortisol debt, if you will. So a lot of patients where when they show up in my office and they're really exhausted or their adrenals are dysregulated, typically they're in this debt state where they've been not sleeping, they've been burning the candle at both ends, and their body's in a state where they're sometimes, and when it goes too far, you'll get to the point where just like a bank or a credit card would say, I'm sorry, you used up your credit limit.
Right, you're all out.
You got nothing left to give. So we're not going to allow you to spend any more money. You need to pay back the debt. Right. And so I always like to tell people this because it's really important. There are lots of things we can do, diet, nutrient wise, supplement wise, to help the adrenals. But at the end of the day, the number one best treatment for adrenal fatigue and balancing hormones is rest. Is getting proper rest. And that means rest where your nervous system is calmed down. So you're not in fight flight. So you're getting the rest where you're actually earning more cortisol. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great analogy because it really, people can understand how money works. Everybody uses it in some form, whether plastic or not. But yeah. And I love that because you talked about how stress then can impact that currency, and that's really important, especially as we're in this state of, the pandemic where that currency level. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about that. So, okay, we're in this higher state of stress. Now we're in a higher chronic state of stress. So how is that impacting the system?
Well, so it's definitely, I feel like I'm starting to, the last 3 or 4 months, I feel like I'm really starting to, I've just noticed in my own body, but I've seen it in my patient population, a real shift in what's going on. And what's interesting, I'm noticing a lot of gut stuff is kind of I feel like initially I was seeing a lot of patients calling in saying my periods have been really out of whack. I'm having 2 periods in a month, or I'm skipping periods, or stuff was just not right. And when we first, in those initial stages of fight flight, let's say chronic fight flight. So let's think about where we were in June of 2020. We've been in it for a few months. Our bodies have been on constant alert for a while. And what happens is if you're like most of us were staying up late, watching TV or watching the news and, you know, sleeping in, not eating well. You know, we were trying to cope as best we could.
Right. Partying, quarantine.
Right. Some people were doing, I have some patients who did beautifully and they're like, quarantine was the best thing ever. But, you know, but even if it was, it's still, our stress levels were higher. You watch the news, there's fear. Our amygdalas were getting triggered all the time. Hey, there's masks. We don't know what's going on. There's so much unknown. But so in that, after about 3 months, I think a lot of people's cortisol levels started to take a dip because we weren't properly resting. We were kind of in that. And what will happen is if you continue stress, is particularly in a female, there are other hormones that are similar to cortisol, like progesterone, for example, or DHEA or pregnenolone, and the body will actually steal from those hormones and shunt them back over to cortisol. Right. So you can start to get lower levels of some of the sex hormones. And this is how stress directly impacts the female hormone cycle. And this can same thing happen with men. Right. Like testosterone levels or some of the androgenic hormones can start to go low because the body is prioritizing creating cortisol over, you know, when you're in acute stress, you know, you don't necessarily need to be ovulating because I don't really want to procreate. So the body is going to prioritize the stress hormones. So that's kind of what I think was happening for a lot of last years. I women coming in, they're like, oh, my periods are out of whack. I've stopped getting them. Or I feel like I'm not ovulating, or, you know, and so, and so that, or some people will actually, if I had some women that were trying to get pregnant, and it's interesting, and their bodies were actually prioritizing their sex hormones, but they were extremely fatigued, really depressed. So their cortisol levels were down. Their sex hormones were normal. And they were coming to me like, man, I'm just so lethargic. I don't feel good. So there's kind of a lot of different presenting ways of adrenal fatigue. So typically if someone's like, they come in and they're like, yeah, my energy is great. Like I'm functioning, I'm doing all these things, but my joints hurt, or my periods are off, or my skin's giving a rash. That typically says to me that the body's prioritizing cortisol over some of the other things. And there are other cases where the body will prioritize other hormones and cortisol levels go down. But what I'm seeing now, and I don't know if this is just but I'm seeing a lot of my patients complaining about gut stuff. Like,
me too.
I just got diagnosed with irritable bowel. I've been bloated or SIBO. And when you're under chronic stress, anytime you're in any sort of stress mode, in fight flight, all the blood flow goes to the arms and the legs. There's no blood flow that I guess
center flow.
There's nothing going on. So you do that for a prolonged period of time. I'm seeing leaky gut like cropping up like crazy. And a lot of my patients, I'm like, wait, why do you have leaky gut? You shouldn't have this. You're so healthy.
What happened here?
You're not on it. They don't have any other risk, but they've been really stressed for a prolonged period of time. I actually just ran a panel on me and I'm like, crap, I have leaky gut. Like, I'm like treating, which is probably why I'm getting a lot of patients, because I'm treating myself.
Right. That's how it turns out, right? You're like, what's going on with myself?
But it's interesting, you know, and I give presentations on how stress affects the body, and stress can have an effect on any system in the body.
Right. So, exactly.
You know, and not that there aren't other causes for things going wrong in the body, but usually when there's been prolonged stress, that has a big part to do with what's going on if things aren't getting better. And the other thing that I think is important to note is that, you know, I have a lot of patients that particularly this year, they're following a protocol for whatever it is they're struggling with that would normally, I'm like, wow, normally this protocol would work. I would say this usually is like 6 to 8 weeks. We'll get you on this and you should be feeling better. The acne should be clear, whatever. But I'm seeing that it's taking people a little bit longer to heal in the chronic stress state, which makes perfect sense because the body is not in healing mode, it's in stress mode. So it's just, and when we want to start to talk about like, how do we get out of this? We have to almost we have to teach the body how to get out of stress mode. We have to remind it that, hey, it's okay. Because that's the other thing that happens when the stress response is triggered. So your amygdala will fire off hey, we notice a stressor, and the amygdala is like black and white. It doesn't have any.
No colors.
So it's like, okay, this is a stress. It'll send a signal to the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is like, okay, we're going to pump out, you know, a whole cascade of hormones, and the adrenals will eventually start to pump out their stress hormones. If in a perfect world, you deal with the stressor, and then cortisol, that stress hormone, is supposed to go back to the brain. It's supposed to bind at the hypothalamus, and it binds to an off button. There's a receptor there.
Okay, everything can kind of turn down the volume.
It's supposed to turn everything down, and then the body's supposed to go back into relax mode.
Resting.
Yes. But I say that, you know, if your body is like if we think back to March of 2020, when you're
Right,
watching
which was a
news,
while ago now.
I know our fight flight buttons were constantly getting pressed. It was like
Right.
on,
And they're still being pressed.
they're still being pressed. And so our bodies are pretty smart. Our bodies are like, I'm not really sure I should turn this off because I'm pretty sure she's just going to turn it back on in 10 minutes. So it actually will stop making the receptor. So you lose the ability to turn off.
Right.
So
It's like
I get a lot of
on.
yeah, they're chronically on, and they've done a lot of studies where it's a glucocorticoid receptor, and this goes back to that glucocorticoid resistance.
Yeah.
It will, and there's a gene that codes for it. It's called the NR3C1 gene. And that gene, sometimes that gene under stress won't work properly, or the body will literally downregulate the production of the receptor because it's like, I don't really want to turn off because I know there's more stress going on. And so most of the treatment protocols when I'm working with patients, I'm trying to activate the production of that receptor, essentially trying to give people more off buttons in their brain, so that the body is able to turn on.
Yeah, like more light switches in the brain, so the brain knows when to turn on and when to turn off.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love what you said too about, the body has the different responses, those different systems in the body that are all affected by stress. And you mentioned the gut, which is such a huge one right now. And let's talk about the brain a little bit, because I know from that hormonal perspective, brain fog or memory, cognition, focus, now we're in this virtual world that a lot of us are working in, and we need this whole different focus. How is that stress affecting that part of the nervous system?
Yeah, well, so I think brain fog is probably one of the number one complaints I've been hearing about.
Right, yeah.
So we're like, I can't focus.
Hands up out there.
Yeah, I think we're all struggling with it. And I have a lot of friends that are practitioners, and we're talking about, hey, if you are a practitioner and if you practice any sort of healthcare right now, you're busy because people are, and it's a lot to be on a Zoom call, so, and it's a lot for everyone right now, right? So, back to cortisol, like just that on itself, it helps you focus. Like it makes you, like when you wake up, think about when you wake up in the morning after you've had a really good night's sleep, before all this stressor, and
before the day starts,
and maybe you've had a little bit of coffee, and it's like you maybe do a little bit of exercise, and you just have that clear, calm. That's when your adrenals are functioning really well.
Right, the Zen moment.
The Zen moment. When adrenal function starts to go, or when cortisol production goes down, you can sometimes either have an overproduction of some of the other stress hormones like epinephrine or norepinephrine or adrenaline, and too much adrenaline and not enough cortisol is typically what like an ADD brings person.
Right, go.
Yeah, go, difficulty focusing, the fogginess, where like the difficulty with memory, that is often, we haven't talked much about thyroid, but I find that usually, if that's going on, you need to make sure that thyroid has been looked at. So, and stress can start to affect the thyroid. It can affect it in several different ways. It can affect the uptake of T3, which is the actual thyroid, into the cells. So, and if you don't get enough thyroid hormone into your cells, you can get that fog brain feeling. You can get really fatigued, and thyroid hormone controls a whole bunch of things in the body.
Yeah, not just the thyroid.
Yes, yeah. But and the other thing that it will do is, because I have a lot of patients that are like, yeah, I have really bad brain fog. They have all the textbook hypothyroid symptoms, but their TSH is normal.
Right, their labs are normal.
Their labs are normal, and they come in, and I will usually find in them either they, like, maybe their labs are not optimal normal, and maybe we tweak that. But I've got some patients where their TSH and T3 like are optimal normal, but their T3 uptake, meaning they're not getting up to the cells. And there's a molecule called reverse T3, which is the mirror image of T3, and under high stress, the body will misconvert from T4 to T3. It will convert more of the T3 molecules into this reverse T3, which is
like backfires.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't, just think about when you're really tired or you're really stressed and you're trying to do, you might not do it right? It's like,
you're like, oh man,
yeah, I gotta do it again. So the body misproduces, and it makes this, it's the same molecule, but it's like the left hand versus the right hand, and all the receptors for T3 are a right-handed glove. And if you're making all these left hands, they can bind, but they don't actually do their job, and the T3 doesn't get into the cell. And so then you can end up with kind of this brain foggy piece. So brain fog, it can be just from stress, because, there's so many things that you need to hold on to. But I think it's often a good idea to look at thyroid hormone when there is that symptom in conjunction with fatigue and other things.
Right. So that's a big system, that thyroid system that can be affected. And it sounds like it's also connected to the adrenal system and the hypothalamus that you mentioned
Yes.
earlier as well. So all those systems are
Yes.
communicating in some way. And then we have
Yeah.
some communication breakdown.
Exactly. I like to, this is another, I like to explain it. I'm like, your brain and your body are in constant communication, and in hormonal, like in endocrinology, if you're thinking about it, it's all about feedback loops. The brain is telling one part of the brain tells another part of the brain to produce a hormone that then tells the end organ to produce something. And then there's a feedback loop that says either keep it going or turn it off. Stress tends to disrupt the feedback loops. So stress will interrupt so that the feedback loops don't work properly. Like we mentioned
Right.
before, where you don't make the off button. So then you're just constantly pumping out. That can happen with the thyroid too. You can have a disruption with the negative feedback loops in the thyroid cascade of hormones. So yeah, so stress can kind of, and the same thing can happen with the female hormone, with the estrogen, progesterone, all of that. We can get disruption in the brain talking to the ovaries and the ovaries talking back to the brain.
Yep. Yeah, that's so true. I love that, because I think when people think about their body, I think it's just a one-way street,
Yeah.
right? Like my brain's going to tell something to do and that's it. But it's like, it's not, we have to have the back and forth communication system.
Yeah.
And like you said, when stress then gets into that equation, it throws everything off.
Yeah, it throws everything off. It really does.
Yeah. And
Um,
so, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I'll go. You go.
I was just going to say, so you were talking about the female hormones, and I'd love for us to kind of like revisit those or talk about those
Yeah.
more in detail, because that's such a huge component. Like you said, people not only in general being affected by stress, but we've seen this shift happen in the pandemic, and I've seen it happening with a lot of my patients, and including myself too. It's like the hormones have just been kind of like out of whack, like not in this like, and normal, and patients especially that are experiencing irregular cycles,
Yes.
very out of their norm. And so
Yes.
then, how, I guess, how can we comfort them? Right. And
Yeah,
letting
well,
them,
I'd say that one, it's kind of normal with what we're dealing with in the world. If your cycle has shifted a little bit, I mean, anytime there's any sort of physiological stress to the body, to a female body, it will tend to cause a subtle change in your sex hormones. So it's often a sign. If your period's off or it's late or it's coming early, it's usually a sign to you, oh,
something's off.
something's
Yeah.
off. So it can be a good, this can be with any symptom, but it can be a good just reminder to you that, oh, hey, something's not right. I need to maybe make changes or do some more self-care practices to get things back on track.
Right.
Sorry, what did you originally ask me?
That's okay. We'll go back to it. So, okay. So we're in this perspective, and our cycles are off.
Yes.
And so let's say there's a scenario like one patient or one person listening, this is the first time they've had this happen. Like,
Yes.
okay, so
Oh,
stress
gotcha.
could be a factor.
Yeah.
What happens if, let's say you're in the state of stress and now your cycles it's been a couple months where your cycles have been irregular. Maybe you've missed a couple periods in between.
Yeah.
Is that when the red flag should come up and say like, okay, something deeper is going on. I need to like see Dr. Kinney or see a specialist to have a look at my cortisol.
I think if you have one cycle that's a little wacky and then they go back to normal, probably not something to be concerned
Right. We're
about.
women. Things make sense.
And that means that your body kind of all the feedback loops went back. But if you've had more than 2 cycles that are very out of the norm for you, it's probably a good idea to just get some things checked out. I mean, and if you're not someone who loves doctors, I mean, you might want to sit down and be like, okay, maybe stress has affected my cycle. I should probably do some calming activities. Most often when cycles are getting prolonged or they're too short, ovulation has been disrupted in some way.
Yeah.
And usually, and it's not always from stress, directly, like it can be from what we talked about earlier, where the body is stealing from progesterone or pregnenolone and
the cortisol steal.
Yeah, the cortisol. And that can affect the health of the corpus luteum, which is what then produces progesterone. And that, so that's probably the number one most common thing I see. But it can also be that stress has affected your thyroid. And then if your thyroid starts underfunctioning, that can affect the period.
Right.
And then there can be there's a lot of things that can affect that along with stress. But I think I would say if you're worried about it, like if you've had 1 or 2 cycles and it's very different, like maybe your period's really, really heavy now and you're getting a lot of cramps with your PMS and you've had that for 2 cycles or 3, 2 or 3 cycles, probably a good idea to go talk to someone and have some hormone labs checked. And while we're on this subject, I'm really passionate about this. If you're going to get your hormones checked,
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about labs.
it's really important to check it at the right time. Like I just had
Right.
like, oh, I just had all my lab work done on the first day of my period. And I was like, oh no.
No, yeah, not randomly. Let's be regimented
Yes.
about when.
So typically from the first day 1 to day 7, your hormones are all pretty low.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're having, I usually like to say to patients, most people feel, if you don't feel good on your period, then that's a different story. But whenever you're not feeling off, or when you're feeling off, that's when you should be checking. Like if you're like, man, every month, you know, starting on day 25 of my cycle, I'm super irritable, I'm bloated, my breasts are sore. We want to look at your hormones on that day.
Right. What's
Because
going on
your
in that
hormones are
picture?
changing all the time. And in order for us to tell, like, hey, is your progesterone too low, your estrogen too high, or vice versa, we need to check on the day that you're actually showing up as symptomatically. And there are tests you can do that will check throughout the whole month if you want to get a little more detailed. The Dutch test does a really good cycle hormone map. There's some other companies that will do that, which can be useful information.
Right.
But if you're going to do just a single blood work check, really important to go on the right day.
Right. Not just to check randomly. So
Yeah.
that's a very good tip.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you're not, so talking about charting your cycle, so that's probably pretty important too, because
That is very important.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So sometimes I ask patients, hey, when was your last period?
I don't know.
So it's so easy in today's world. There are a million apps that will track your period. All you have to do is when you get it, you put in the dates and you
click the button.
It's actually, they're really great apps because you can keep track of all kinds of symptoms. And it's so helpful. And I'm sure you know this in your, it's so helpful to have a patient be like, oh, hey, like here, you know, because sometimes when we're trying to gather information, and if you have brain fog, you might not remember.
Right.
Like,
You might not remember.
And it's helpful for us to be like, yeah, oh, look, you know, every day 21, you're really tired and your back pain kicks up and you feel depressed. You know, we should maybe do some testing on that day. So the more you can kind of, and it also helps you understand how your body works. And
it's empowering.
I can't remember whose show this was. I was on someone's show and we were talking about using your your female cycle. If you know it really well, you can know, like, play into your strengths of, you know, some people feel really great and energized, you know, the first 10 days of their cycle, and then maybe during ovulation they feel really sociable and they want to go out more, and then maybe during the last week they feel like they kind of want to take some time to themselves. And if you have a really regular cycle, you can kind of start to schedule your life around that a little bit. So that you know, I try not to schedule too many intense things the week before my period. Like I change my workouts up. I try to not, you know, my workouts are a little bit gentler. I take more days off the week before my period because I'm usually a little bit more tired.
Right. You want your body to be able to have the energy it needs.
Yeah. So, and especially when there's adrenal, you know, if you've got adrenal stuff and you know that's directly impacting your hormone, looking at, I think exercise is a big thing to look at, making sure you're exercising correctly with your cycle, which is a whole other topic, but
cycle exercising. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in regards to labs for the adrenal system, are there specific ones that then you would recommend testing? Because it sounds like it's all correlated in there. Yeah. So and the thyroid, like you mentioned.
I will usually, when someone comes in and I'm kind of just working them up for everything, I run a full thyroid panel. I will check a morning fasting cortisol, which it's not the best test, but insurance will cover it. And it's like a good quick snapshot.
It's giving you something.
It's giving you something. And this is, you know, if you want to do testing and have insurance cover it. I also will check DHEA sulfate and pregnenolone, which are both kind of precursors and can, you know, get shunted back and forth. So we can get just a feel for what those look like. And then I always check that reverse T3 because that's a thyroid test, but it also allows me to know, like, oh, your stress level is probably pretty high about a lot of this. And then we'll look at estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and then LH and FSH, which are the ovulation hormones. And I typically, depending on when symptoms are, but most patients, if their symptoms are like last week of the cycle, I'll do it around day 21 if they have a 28-day cycle, because that's typically when progesterone should be at its highest. So that's if we're doing just general basic labs. There are other companies that will do saliva hormone testing for cortisol. You can do a 4-point cortisol throughout the day, so we can get kind of a picture. Yeah, which can be great. I often will just ask patients, like, you know, on a day, be like, have a day without coffee and let's chart your energy, because
that's pretty easy, right?
90% of the time, your energy levels are going to correlate with what your cortisol levels are. That's not always the case, and sometimes sometimes the testing can be helpful, but usually, if you're trying to like save money and not spend money on out of pocket testing, I do like just charting your energy to see kind of what if you're like, I'm exhausted in the morning and I have so much energy at night, that usually tells me that your cortisol levels are probably low in the morning and they're probably really high at night.
Wired and tired.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the testing for adrenal fatigue is more talking about symptoms and is more through a clinical history, and when someone's like, oh yeah, like I ask them what their stress level's like, and they're like, I just got divorced and I went through a move and my dad died, and and they're naming like the top 3. I'm like, okay, all right, well,
you a little stressed.
The test, and then we just talk about, I'll ask them what their energy levels are like, what their sleep is like, and we can kind of get a good picture of what stage the adrenals are in just based on their symptoms.
Yeah, that's great. So some kind of log that they could keep maybe like over a week or something to give you some good data, or they could do it on their own if you're listening and you want to know about kind of like what your stress level is or cortisol levels are throughout the regular daytime.
Exactly.
And what about sleep? I'd love for us to talk a little bit about sleep. You mentioned cortisol can affect the circadian rhythms. How is sleep playing a factor in the adrenal system and the hormones?
Yeah. So sleep is the number one most important thing for getting your adrenal glands restored, right? Because when we're in full sleep, that's when we're in full rest. We're in rest digest, we're in sympathetic. That's when our body's healing. It's gonna heal the digestive tract. It's gonna heal the adrenal glands. That's when the body does its recharge time, right? But the tricky thing is, in certain stages of adrenal fatigue, particularly like so the first stage of adrenal fatigue is usually not your fatigue. You're usually in that like burning the candle from both ends and you're just going. A lot of times you're not sleeping very much that time because you're on high alert. So you're waking up maybe at 3 a.m. and you can't go back to sleep, or you're having a hard time falling asleep. And this is typically what leads to the further is you're not sleeping well. Sometimes later on, that tired and wired thinking, oh, we were tired all day, but then you can't sleep at night. So it's important. One of the first things that I do with a lot of my patients with adrenal is we try to reset their circadian rhythm. So we talk about the importance of getting morning light. I use a little bit of melatonin at night so that we can make sure that because melatonin and cortisol have opposing action in the body. So when cortisol is high, the body typically keeps melatonin low. And when melatonin is high, the body keeps cortisol low. So, and this, we were talking earlier about like all of us on this virtual world on screens all the time.
Right.
When you stare at blue lights on a screen, it affects our pineal gland's production of melatonin. So melatonin levels tend to be lower, which then the body's like, oh, melatonin's low, I should make cortisol high. So it kicks off our stress response.
Right.
So I like to do a little bit of I typically will put people on, like an adrenal support supplement in the morning, right when they first wake up, to kind of build the cortisol levels early on, so that we, again, and then have them get outside, get morning sunlight, just almost as if you were jet lagged, right? Like if you fly to Europe, you mentioned you were going on a trip, but when you go, the most important thing is to get outside so your body can know, oh, I'm supposed to be awake right now. And so I see this a lot with like in the teenage or college population. They're sleeping in a dark basement and they don't get up till 2, and then they can't fall asleep, and their circadian rhythm's off mostly,
and they're on the computer all the time.
The body's confused about when it's supposed to be awake and when it's supposed to be asleep. So there are some really basic, a lot of healing adrenal fatigue can be with really basic lifestyle practices,
foundations, right?
Exactly. Like, and we've even talked about blood sugar, but keeping blood sugar really balanced is also really important for all of this stuff,
So let's talk about that, because I know that people, especially when you have the snacking, like, all different types of you getting up for work, working from the computer, taking breaks to eat. How is that blood sugar then impacting the stress?
Well, so we want to keep blood sugar stable. When blood sugar, because what happens is if your blood sugar dips too low and we get into a state, if your blood sugar goes super low, that actually kicks off the stress response, because the body,
oh my God, you're going to die.
Really, because the body, when the stress hormones get produced, one of cortisol's jobs, whether you've eaten or not, is to go to the liver and tell the liver to break down glycogen, which is stored sugar. So when we're under high stress, whether you have sugar in your system or not, typically glycogen is getting broken down. So your sugars are going to be, I have patients that don't eat sugar at all, and I test their A1C and it's through the roof, and they're like, wait, how is this possible?
What's going on?
Your stress level is really high. But so it's really important to do something that keeps blood sugar balanced. So, obviously eating lots of sugar is not great, because that's going to,
that doesn't help.
That does not help. But so, keep eating at regular intervals. So eating when you first wake up and making sure that, well, this is a question I get a lot about intermittent fasting, whether it's good or bad. I tend to find that people who have been in chronic acute fight flight, not great to fast for too long, because you'll get that blood sugar dip.
Right.
Once you kind of have your nervous system is a little bit more balanced, then it can be intermittent fasting can be great, because it can be really restorative for all kinds of purposes. But I do typically recommend when I'm first working with someone with adrenal fatigue, like you need to eat breakfast. Like the coffee in the morning and not eating is not great for adrenal.
Not good for the adrenal system, right?
No. Yeah, because it's you're spending money on your credit card, you're putting your system into fight flight with the caffeine, and you're not eating, which can cause, it'll cause a blood sugar dip. And typically people will then get really hungry around 10 or 11, and they'll grab the sugary snack, and then the sugar goes up. And this can lead to weight gain. This can lead to irritability, mood. It can cause gut stuff. So it's, so this is where diet really comes into play, like making sure you're getting an adequate amount of protein, making sure you're getting, healthy fruits and veggies, a good fiber. Like diet's really a foundational part of this.
Oh yeah, that's so true. I love that. Because, when we have that change in our blood sugar, it affects everything that we do, our decisions that we make, our hormone levels, like you mentioned, everything is affected by what we eat. And sometimes when we're under stress, we reach for things that we don't usually eat.
That's exactly right.
Like, oh, I'm going to have that donut, and I never eat donuts or something like that.
Yeah.
Not that I eat donuts, but every once in a while.
Yeah. Oftentimes what happens when you get the stress and the combo of like a blood sugar dip, you're like, oh my gosh, I got to have some sugar now.
Right.
Yeah.
I was hypoglycemic when I was younger. And so now when I'm in a state of adrenal fatigue or stress, that's like the first place it goes. And I can feel it right away. I'm like, oh my God, I could tell, like, okay, my blood sugar is totally dipped. So I'm really aware of it. But some people don't have that awareness, because they feed it with some other like upper or some types of sugar to get them back into balance, instead of like a solid protein, something to help stabilize. Right.
Yeah. And if you think, I always think about, we didn't talk about this yet, but I think about like if there's a triangle of your sex hormones, your thyroid, and your adrenal hormones, they're kind of in this balance, right? And we want it to be balanced. And if one goes up or two go up, it's going to affect the other two. But in the center of that is blood sugar. So when blood sugar is balanced, it helps keep everything else more balanced. So it's really hard to, like, I've had a lot of patients with PCOS lately, and I was explaining to one of them today how insulin resistance and blood sugar stuff is typically what triggers the development of polycystic ovarian syndrome. And that's typically because blood sugar is doing this all the time, and they get insulin resistance, and that can start to affect the sex hormones. And anyways, but so it's really important to keep blood sugar balanced for all issues in the body. And, particularly in this time, when we're with COVID and whatnot, a lot of the people who are having complications, typically, diabetics and people with insulin resistance are not faring as well when they get the virus. So this, diet is so important. It's really important, right? It's always been important, but it's extra important right now.
It's super important right now. If you're listening out there, we want you eating well. Very important. Yeah, I totally agree. And so when we're talking about that stress and that immune function, let's talk a little bit about that. And since you brought that up, how is stress impacting the immune system? Are we seeing, like, does it have, does chronic stress make our immune system better or worse, or what's the key there?
Acute stress will turn on the immune system. So one of cortisol's jobs is to activate the immune system. So, and usually when I use the term acute, but like shorter terms of chronic stress, so like 2 or 3 months, can sometimes put the immune system into overdrive. Like that can cause the development of allergies and, autoimmune stuff. And it can kind of kick things to go overdrive, because the body's like, because if we think about it's a certain internal stressor, let's say that you get, strep throat, right? And the body wants to kill the strep throat. Well, your body recognizes that something is there that shouldn't be, and that's going to trigger a stress response, which is going to send cortisol, and it's going to turn on all the white blood cells to go and attack. So your nervous system gets activated. Think about when if you have the flu, or if anyone's had COVID or any sort of and you're restless at night, like you can't sleep very well. It's because in order to activate your immune system, your nervous system has to kind of go into a bit of overdrive to get things going. So, but what happens is kind of the same thing with the other. It's like, you're overproducing cortisol, your immune system is overstimulated. After a while, it can start to take a dip, and it can start to then underfunction. And when it starts to underfunction, that's not so great. And then, and the immune system is also directly linked with thyroid, because your thyroid hormone is one of its main jobs is to maintain the basal metabolic rate, which controls the body temperature. And our body temperature is one of our mainline defenses for not allowing things to live in us. So,
right.
so this is a good thing. Like if you're someone whose body temperature tends to run chronically low, like if you're always running like 97, which a lot of people are more aware of now after, there was temperature checks all the time.
Right.
People are like, yeah, my temperature is always 97. I'm like, well, that's actually a sign that your thyroid's not functioning properly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if it, we're supposed to be 98.6 is the temperature at which most viruses and bacteria can't live very, like a lot of the ones that we should not be having problems with. But if we go down to 97, it's not a huge difference, but that temperature, a lot more things can live at that temperature.
Right.
So if you run around 97, you might be more likely to, have chronic infection type things. And that can be how stresses affect the thyroid, or it can be stress, your immune system has been weakened. So there's a lot of different ways that can interplay.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So if you're in this state of chronic stress, maybe you have had your hormones checked, or maybe your adrenals are like, okay, things are happening. What should someone do? like let's talk about some of maybe your top like tips for helping with adrenal fatigue, or helping with that, that we talked about a lot of different things here. So maybe your top 3 tips to reset and balance stress.
Well, no, but they're all
connected.
Interesting thing is like, they're all connected, and we talked about a lot of different things, but the things to do to get your body back, they're kind of all the same.
Right.
I mean, I'll say that with a caveat. Clearly, we're treating. I mean, there are lots of different details that, we might, but the first step in treating any of this is we have to get your nervous system to calm down. So sleep, obviously you want to make sure you're resting. And if you're not a great sleeper, that's okay. That's something that you probably need to be working on, or you need to be working
sleep
with a
hygiene.
Yeah, work with your sleep, like getting sleep hygiene. So get off your phone before you go to bed, read a book. Getting rid of screen time like an hour before bed can be a game changer. It's really
especially now. I'm on the computer like 12 hours a day. It's like crazy.
It's really hot, and it's not great for us. So I really like melatonin, a little bit of melatonin, like I talked about for a circadian reset. Talk to your doctor before you take any supplement. Melatonin is generally pretty safe. And then one of my favorite things right now is breath work, just really simple. And this can be helpful for your digestive stuff. This can be helpful for feeling anxious. And you can go on YouTube and you can look up, 5-minute breath work things, but I really like to place one hand on the chest, one hand on the belly, and take a deep
that's a great one.
And breathe into your abdomen. And if you do that 5 to 10 times, that will actually flip your nervous system back into parasympathetic. So it's so simple, and it's free, and you can do it anywhere. You can
it's free.
On the phone. My patients are seeing me from here up, and I'm like, okay, taking a deep breath. This is a heavy thing today. Yeah. Breath work it's really powerful. So using that, and again, that's something anyone can do. It's safe for everybody. It's not, if you're on medications, it's not contraindicated. So that, and getting outside in the morning. So get outside and get a little bit of morning sunlight. If you can go for a walk, that's great. Get a little bit of what I like to call vitamin N, or nature. There's so many studies that show that even when we just look at pictures of plants, it calms our nervous system down.
Yeah.
So outside and you see trees. So, I've been trying to put as many plants in my office as possible, because I'm in here all day long, and I feel like I want to, if you can't get outside because you're stuck at your computer, get some plants in your space. It makes a really big difference. I mean, it seems, and some of these things seem almost
rudimentary, almost, right?
But they're really important. And and like I said, they're the basic things. And sometimes even when I'm prescribing them, I'm like, oh, this seems so basic. But people come back and they're like, yeah,
it works.
I feel so much better.
Right.
So there are some really simple things, and water. Drink water.
Right. Water. I'm gonna drink some myself.
Yes, drink enough water. Breath work. What else did I say?
Sleep, balancing your sleep.
Yeah, and if you're struggling with sleep, I highly recommend to try doing like mini meditations throughout the day, like 5 to 10.
I love that. I do that.
Yeah. And I recommend to a lot of my patients, if you're a mom, or if you're working, whatever, if you're struggling to not get enough rest, to try to block out 10 minutes. And I call it getting horizontal, where you just lay down, and you can read, but just lay down, listen to music, close your eyes, and just it's like you're
tune out.
It's a quick little recharge. And when you lie down, your blood pressure is going to drop, your heart rate's going to drop. It's going to allow the body to kind of be like, oh, I can actually I can be safe. Because, even when we're sitting up and we're being present with people and we're not at a computer, like we're kind of on, right? But if you lay down and you close your eyes, it allows your system to turn off for a bit. And a lot of, in order to get your body to spend more time in the parasympathetic, we need to train it that it's okay to do that. So
right. It's safe.
Yes, you have to practice relaxing.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? We have to practice to relax.
It's really crazy.
What? I don't understand that.
And take vacation. It was really funny. I got shingles at the beginning of this year because I didn't in January. I didn't take a vacation and I was so great. And my body forced me to take a vacation.
Right, you're taking a vacation.
I was not practicing what I was preaching. I was on screens too long, and I was not getting enough sleep, and I just moved. I mean, everyone I feel like has dealt with COVID plus another stressor, regular life.
Right.
And and it was a big wake up call for me because I was like, oh wow, I had to take a week off because I was in a lot of pain. Shingles is painful. It is no joke.
No,
but my body yelled at me and said, you need some time off. So
your body yelled at you.
Yeah, it yelled at me. It was the only thing that I would listen to. It was like, I'm going to give you shingles, and that's going to make you take a week off.
You are going to be at home and resting. Yeah, that's so key.
Yeah. So, making sure you're allowing time to turn off is also really important. So taking, and if you can't do a full week vacation, take like a mini vacation or take a weekend where you don't make any plans and you just plan
stay vacation.
A staycation. Yeah. I'm actually doing that next week. I have my kids and we're not traveling. We're just doing a staycation. Nice. All the travel stuff, it seemed with everything up in the air, it just seems stressful. I'm like, we're just going to stay home.
Yeah.
And we're going to just
fun. Have fun. Yeah. I love to do that myself. And I love what you said about the breath work, the meditation, the mini, take a mini vacation in your office just for a couple, 5-10 minutes, lay down, relax, tune out your environment. And like you said, it's just that reset for the parasympathetic system. Can do wonders for someone, especially if you have the stress where it's especially in your job in the Zoom world or wherever you're stressed and you have a break and stress and break during the break time, reset.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Well, and I say those recommendations, but getting a reset can look different to different people, right? So I sometimes say to my patient, hey, what really relaxes you? And some people are like, I love walking my dog. Great. Well, that's what you should do.
Just do it.
Or I love knitting, or I love, if it's a relaxing activity that also brings you joy, that's a big win. If you're like, I love to knit and I love to knit something for my grandchildren or and it's a relaxing thing for you, then that's what you should be doing, when you're feeling stressed, because that'll calm you down. So you may want to, if you guys are listening, think about what really what makes you feel happy and relaxed. And if you have a hard time answering that question, then
dive deeper.
Or you need to go try out some different things. So sometimes I have homework for patient. I'm like, okay, we're going to try these 5 activities, see which one feels the best.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For me, I love to go to the local sauna. We have it's called hot sauna, and I can, go sweat, and I totally, it's just you can't talk in it. So it's really quiet and I can just tune out everything. And that's my reset. I'm I'm going to go to the hot house and be there for an hour. They have a cold plunge. I love it.
Great.
Yeah. It's super good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that for you. So, and that's a great example. There may be a place that you go or something that you go, just something, so if you live near the beach or near the water, maybe just going and sitting by the water might be a thing. Or I love to read. So for me, reading a good, laying down or sitting on a porch and reading a book, that is my ultimate. And if I stop doing that, then I notice I'm I haven't read in a while. I don't feel that great.
You're oh yeah, what's happening? I didn't do my reset.
Yeah. I've been recently, and I kind of discovered this during COVID. I didn't watch much TV, but when COVID hit, I watched a lot of TV, and I found out that I really like dramatic TV shows. And I would stay up, late, but I would feel horrible the next day because you're nervous. If you're watching a TV show that's got you I gotta watch the next episode, you're stimulating your stress response. Oh my gosh, they just killed so-and-so, or what's happening? But and I kind of
need a relaxing one, watching the birds or something.
Yeah. Well, no, for me, I was I need to read. If I read before bed, a nice calming romance novel or something like that, that's way better than and I still like those shows, but I have discovered I need to watch them during the day and not before bed because it's wrong to sleep. And then it's not.
Yeah. Well, that's really key. And that ties back to what you talked about before, is cutting off that screen time, and TV is included in that
Is totally
screen time. You know,
I'm a big, when patients are struggling with sleep, we talk about, okay, what is your sleep routine, and TV in the bedroom. I'm not a big fan of that.
no, so many of my patients, the same thing, because they want to
Yeah,
have like a separate TV from their partner. I'm like, okay, you got to take the TV
yeah,
out of the bedroom or not have it on when
yeah,
you're sleeping, because
yeah.
it's your like reset zone, like you talked about. We
Yeah,
have
bed
to have
should
that
be for
time.
sleep and for sex. Like that's what should,
That's
because
it.
we haven't talked about that. Sex is also a really great way to calm the nervous system down. So
Yeah.
whether it's with yourself or with a partner, loving part, like that can be a wonderful way to calm, because you have to be in parasympathetic mode to be sexually aroused. If you're in
Right.
fight flight, you're not gonna. I mean, you could have
No,
sex, but you might have to
running
join
from
it.
your partner.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's not a good way. But yeah, but that can be, if that can be a really great way to calm and to balance hormones too. We didn't talk about it.
Right.
Like oftentimes with my women their hormones are out of whack, I'm like, you need to have regular sex. Regular
Yeah.
sex will
Get
actually
yourself
help.
balanced. Mhm.
Yeah, it will help balance the sex hormones. So
Yeah.
uh,
Oh, that's great. I love that, Dr. Kinney. We talked about so much great stuff today. And as we're wrapping up, I'd love for you to talk about how people can find you, your
sure.
website, and follow you on social media, and tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, you can find me on my website. I offer free 15-minute consults if you want to know if you're a good fit for me or if I'm a good fit for you. And Instagram, I do a lot of Instagram lives. So if you want to check me out there and follow me there. And then I launched a podcast in January. It's kind of just
Nice.
and it's
Yay.
going really well. I love it. It's so fun. We cover a wide variety of topics. So if you want to go check it out and listen, that's great.
And that's
And
called Dr.
it's
Kinney,
called the Dr. Kinney
the
Show.
Dr. Kinney Show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. And,
Yeah.
and they can find
We
that
talk
on the
about
website.
all kinds of things related to how, tools to help you heal yourself. So
Nice. Oh, that's great. Love it. Well, people can find that. I'll put that in the show notes. And one last thing as we're wrapping up today, if you had an unlimited budget, what would you do right now to change the planet?
oh, what would I do? So I've actually been asked this question before.
Oh,
I would
nice.
actually I would want to set up naturopathic clinics all over the place and give people free access to them.
Yay, that's a great one.
And to do preventative health, to talk to teach people about diet, lifestyle, and how that can really impact, the prevention of chronic disease, which is what a lot
Mm,
of people in this country, I mean, all over the world, but yeah, I would want to make this medicine available to everyone.
yeah. Oh, me too. Love that. That's a great one. Well, thank you so much again, Dr. Kinney, for joining us today,
You're
and
welcome.
have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.